Ukraine may receive $2.7 billion from the IMF this summer under a plan by the International Monetary Fund Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, to allocate $650 billion from international reserves to restore the world economy after the coronavirus (COVID-19) crisis, UBN reported on April 13. The money is designed to bolster the growth of weaker countries that are grappling with the tail end of the pandemic. The Ukraine's current $5 billion standby agreement with the IMF deal is currently suspended thanks to foot-dragging on reform and backtracking in the fight against corruption. Ukraine was due to receive $700 million last year that never arrived and another $2.2 billion this year before the SBA expires, but analysts are unsure any of this money will arrive. However, the $2.7 billion proposal is not part of the SBA program, and unlike the conventional IMF programs, this money would not have to be paid back. The National Bank of Ukraine Governor, Kyrylo Shevchenko, announced the possible windfall on April 12 following a meeting with Alfred Kammer, the director of the IMF's European department. The extra cash would be an enormous boon for the economy, which has a heavy repayment schedule this year of some $16 billion in debt redemptions, of which $11 billion comes due in September. Analysts have been worried that Kyiv will be unable to meet this bill without the IMF's help, and if it dipped into its meager gross international reserves (GIR) resources that could cause a currency crisis. The extra cash will also help boost Ukraine's lackluster growth outlook. The IMF just upgraded its outlook for global economic growth in 2021 to 6% in 2021 from its previous 5.5% forecast in January. For advanced economies, the IMF estimated growth of 5.1%, with the United States set to expand by 6.4%. The IMF is more pessimistic on Ukraine, which it forecasts will grow by 4% this year and 3.4% in the following 2 years, whereas the official outlook is for a more optimistic 5%. Ukraine's economy contracted by 2.8% in January and February, compared to the first 2 months of last year, estimated the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade in March. Except for retail trade, all sectors were down. The consensus forecasts put Ukraine's 2021 GDP growth at 4%. These forecasts were made before the April coronavirus lockdown in Kyiv and half of the regions. Recent war jitters about Russia's military threats also may dampen investment and growth this year. The IMF expects Ukraine's nominal GDP will reach $4,606 billion, $165 billion in 2021, or 12.6% higher year-on-year. It expects Ukraine's CPI will increase to 7.2% by end 2021, from 5.0% as of end 2020, and will gradually slow down to 5.0% by 2024. The fund also expects that Ukraine's current account balance will switch from a $6.6 billion surplus last year to $4.2 billion deficit in 2021, numbers comparable to those observed in 2018 to 2019. It expects Ukraine's debt-to-GDP ratio will decrease to 58% in 2021 and 45% in 2026, from 61% in 2020. The IMF numbers imply the fund is expecting stability for the Ukrainian hryvnia versus the dollar, as the USD rate is expected to be on average 28.0 in 2021 and between 27.6 and 27.8 in the next 5 years, Concord Capital said in a recent note. While Ukraine currently enjoys a comfortable $27.04 billion of GIR as of end March, this is not enough to cope with the debt redemptions this year without the IMF's help. The National Bank reported on April 7 that gross reserves cover 4.3 months of future imports, which is more than enough to underpin the stability of the hryvnia. But the debt servicing demand has already started, and the GIR decreased 5% month-on-month in March due to large debt servicing outlays. In particular, the government spent $571 million on coupons for international Eurobonds and $325 million on the repayment and servicing of local Eurobonds, as well as paying $508 million to the IMF. This was partially offset by $474 million in proceeds from the placement of local Eurobonds. The government has been able to tap the local debt market since it was hooked up to the international capital markets last year, but foreign investors have become nervous and their share has been falling recently. Another driver of the decline was the $250 million decrease in market value of financial instruments held by the NBU. Meanwhile, the NBU increased gross reserves by $50 million via the purchase of dollars on the forex market. In April, government outlays related to debt repayment and servicing will be moderate, about $380 million, which can be potentially offset by new dollar borrowings on the local market. We do not expect any large forex operations by the NBU this month, so if there is no other decline in the value of the NBU's portfolio, Ukraine's gross reserves are likely to be flat M per M by the end of April, Concord Capital said in a research note.